Well, this has been my pride and joy for 75 years, since I was 15. I remember I just come back from the evacuation and my grandfather took me to Beadle and Maitland, who were having a sale, and I picked up a copy of Drinkwater's History of the Siege. And that really got me started. At the beginning, I took everything he wrote seriously, and then I found out that all the early history was wrong. So I have spent my spare time over the last 75 years trying to find out what was the true history of Gibraltar. I think I have been quite successful on that, because I don't hear the extravagant statement that I used to hear 50 years ago. People now take it for granted that Carrick didn't build a Burj Castle, and so on. And these were things that were the Bible truths when I was young, and I've managed to change people's attitude to these things. I mean, Gibraltar has had a very long and very active history, and lots of things have happened.
Tell us a bit about the importance of academia and reading and stuff like that, and a bit of your own sort of history.
Well, I started collecting at a time when it wasn't fashionable evidence of the social history, where the Gibraltarians came from. And my first monograph, I was asked to give a talk to the Jewish Historical Society of England at University College on the settlement of Jews in Gibraltar. Well, you can't look at the settlement of Jews in Gibraltar without looking at the Spanish and the Genoese and so on. And over the centuries, the population has changed. But in the 18th century, the civilian population, stable, as distinct from the English population, which was here for a short while and then left, it was 60% Genoese and 40% Moroccan Jewish. And this was the situation until the end of the 18th century. By 1800, of course, things happened. We had the Napoleonic Wars. Gibraltar, instead of being a backwater, became a tremendous trading place. And you had an open frontier with Spain, and Spaniards started coming in, and the character of the population changed during the 19th century. I've also saw things, claims were made about the history of Gibraltar, which if you look into, if it's the early history, the Moroccan archives, or later history, I looked at the archives in England, because the archives in Gibraltar were not then really available. But in the last 30 years, people like Tommy Finlayson and Anthony Pitaluga have done a lot to produce from things which one didn't even know they had.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Remind us your age, when you were born, and the Gibraltar you were born into.
I was born round the corner in Governor's Parade in 1930. I still live in Governor's Parade. In fact, what happened is that I was born opposite my grandfather's house, because my father was newly married and had rented an apartment. With the years, my grandfather died, his heirs died, and I bought them all out, and I owned my grandfather's house on the other side of Governor's Parade, which at the time was overshadowed by the theatre, which is now with us no more. My work was in England. I never made any money in Gibraltar. I've spent a lot of money because running a bookshop is an expensive business and it's not a particularly profitable one. But I love books. And I think I enabled a whole generation, when it was still difficult to get books, to read widely. Today it's different. You can get books either online or you can get them through Amazon, so you know what there is. If you open your computer, you've got lists of books that you may want to read. In those days, it was still different. I was here in Gibraltar, as I said, between 1970, when I was sold out, until 1980. In between, I was treated in Boston from the problem with my broken nerves in the face. And after that, I found I was a bit short of money, so I went abroad to work again. I remarried. I've been married 3 times, and my third wife didn't want to come to live in Gibraltar, so I stayed on in England, but I was still a constant visitor and kept in touch with what things were happening. One of the things I did in order to popularize the history of Gibraltar and to bring people into researching it was to start the Gibraltar Heritage Journal, which I started by chance in 1992 to raise money for the trust, because I was a member of the Friends of Gibraltar Committee. And it's caught on, and now it's being run by Richard Garcia, who is a very good historian, and I think it has produced something valuable, and it encouraged a lot of people to research the history of Gibraltar.
Tell us a bit about this. Tell us a bit about the significance of your collection.
I started by saying that at the time, researching history of Gibraltar was a secret business. Everybody did a secret and didn't want the others to know what they were doing, and I felt that was wrong. First of all, the history of Gibraltar cannot be looked at in isolation to things that were happening in the wide world. So you have to know the history of Britain, of Spain, of Morocco, of the Navy, of wars, of what happened, of the social changes in the army, and so on. Secondly, and after that, the social history of Gibraltar cannot be understood unless you know what was happening across the border in Spain. And I built up a very good connection with the Instituto de Estudios Campos Gibraltareños of Algeciras, and in the end they made me an honorary director. And I'm still in touch with them. And I have encouraged people here who are very loath to really share the information which they have, which extends our knowledge of what's happening in Gibraltar in a very interesting way. I've always written for them in Spanish, which is very difficult because I'm not used to it, now that I'm mostly Gibraltarian. But I felt, as a matter of courtesy, I should do that. And it has paid off. But many people still won't have anything to do with Spanish, they won't read Spanish. But that is very much a part of the history of Gibraltar.
Tell us a bit about what you want to achieve by sort of handing the collection off to the library. And
I've built up a collection of something like 4,000 volumes. As I said, it covers a wide range of subjects that touch on Gibraltar. So I decided that I had this collection which was useful from the point of view of anybody who wants to know the history of Gibraltar, and I should give it to a place where it's going to be looked after and preserved.
Spot on. And just on a final note, tell us a bit about your own sort of writings, your own life as an author.
Well, as I said, I started writing about the social history of Gibraltar. I really was the first to take a Gibraltarian outlook on what was happening. Others have taken it up. I mean, Richard Garcia, Manolo Galliano, and so on, they're following up. There is still a lot of work to be done. But I think I laid the foundation of the spread of research that has to be done to look at what's happened to each section of Gibraltar.